The smell of roast beef filled the kitchen, heavy, rich, and cruel. It was the kind of smell that made your stomach twist when you hadn't eaten all day. I stood by the doorway, holding Ethan's tiny hand, his eyes wide as he stared at the food laid out across the long oak table. My mother's laughter rose above the clatter of dishes, bright and false, like the clinking of cheap glass pretending to be crystal. Amanda, my sister, tossed her blonde hair over her shoulder, grinning as her twins climbed onto their chairs, their polished shoes tapping against the wooden legs. "Dinner's ready," Mom called, her voice full of that fake warmth she saved for everyone but me. Ethan tugged on my sleeve. "Mama, I'm hungry," he whispered, his little voice barely audible over the noise. I knelt down beside him, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "I know, baby. Just wait a minute, okay?" I tried to smile, but it felt brittle, like glass about to shatter. Mom was slicing the roast, her knife moving in steady, perfect strokes. Each piece she carved landed neatly on Amanda's kids' plates, thick and juicy, dripping onto the mashed potatoes. My father leaned back in his chair, beer in hand, the picture of comfort. I swallowed hard and stepped closer. "Mom," I said quietly. "Could Ethan have a piece? Just a small one. He hasn't eaten since morning." The room went still. The twins stopped giggling. Even Amanda's smirk faltered for a heartbeat. Then Mom looked up. Slowly. Her eyes cold as steel. The slap came before I could even flinch. A sharp crack, so loud it felt like the world had stopped to listen. My cheek burned instantly, the heat spreading through my whole body. Ethan gasped, clutching my leg. "Why would I feed trash?" Mom hissed, "when real family is sitting here?" Amanda let out a laugh, sharp, delighted, cruel. "Oh, Mom, that was perfect," she said. "Finally, she knows her place." Dad chuckled, taking another sip of his beer. "You've got some nerve, Sarah. Asking for more after everything we've already done for you." Ethan's voice was so small I almost didn't hear it. "I'm not trash," he whispered. But everyone else did. The twins started chanting, "Trash boy. Trash boy," until the words filled the room like poison. I froze. My face still stung, my hands shook, and my mind went completely blank. "Stop it!" I screamed, but my voice cracked, swallowed by their laughter. Mom didn't even look at me. She carved another slice of beef, placed it on Amanda's plate, and said, "This is for the children who matter." Ethan buried his face against me, sobbing quietly. I gathered him in my arms, my heart breaking, my pride bleeding out onto that polished floor. Without another word, I turned and walked away, from the table, from their laughter, from the lie of family. That night, as Ethan slept against my chest, the scent of roast beef still clung to my skin. It didn't smell like food anymore. It smelled like shame. Like something burning inside me, slow and deep, that would never go out. I used to think going back home would mean safety, but the Miller house had become a cage made of polite cruelty. Every morning, I woke before dawn, made breakfast for Ethan, and watched Mom cook bacon and eggs for Amanda and her kids. She never looked at me. Dad read his paper, pretending not to hear the way Amanda sighed whenever I entered the room. "You're still here?" she'd ask, half laughing. The twins would whisper, "Trash boy's mom," and burst into giggles. I swallowed every word I wanted to throw back at them, every tear that threatened to escape. At night, when the house grew quiet, I lay awake beside Ethan, listening to his small breaths. I thought about leaving, but where would we go? I had no job, no savings, no one waiting to help. So I stayed, because sometimes survival isn't brave, it's just necessary. Still, something inside me began to shift. The pain didn't numb anymore, it sharpened. I started to see them clearly, the pride, the hypocrisy, the masks they wore. And for the first time, I didn't just feel small, I felt awake. They thought they had broken me. But in the silence of that house, I was learning how to build my fire. For weeks after that dinner, the world around me felt muffled, as if I were living underwater. Every sound, every laugh that drifted down the hallway scraped against something raw inside me. I did what I always did, kept quiet, kept small, made myself invisible. Ethan still woke hungry most mornings, but he didn't ask anymore. He knew better now. He'd seen what happened when we asked for too much. The slap had faded from my skin, but not from my mind. Sometimes, while washing dishes, I'd feel it again, the sting, the shock, the way the room had gone silent before the laughter started. That sound haunted me more than the pain itself. It was the sound of people who believed they had the right to hurt me. One morning, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. I looked older, tired, empty. My hands trembled as I scrubbed the same cup over and over. Then I saw Ethan's reflection behind me, his little face pale, his eyes hollow. He wasn't just watching me, he was learning from me. Learning silence. Learning shame. That was the moment something in me cracked. I couldn't let him grow up believing this was what family meant. So I stopped waiting for them to change. At first, my rebellion was small. I started writing. Late at night, after Ethan fell asleep, I'd take out an old notebook and fill it with everything they'd said, everything they'd done. The insults, the sneers, the laughter, the slaps. Every word became a weapon I didn't yet know how to use. I wrote it not to remember, but so I wouldn't ever forget. Then I started listening more carefully. Mom's weakness was her pride. She couldn't stand for the neighbors to think she was anything less than the perfect matriarch. Dad's was his reputation. He loved to play the respectable man, the pillar of the community. Amanda, she was addicted to admiration. Every like, every comment on her perfect life photos fed her like oxygen. I realized then that every one of them wore a mask, and if I wanted to hurt them, I didn't need to scream. I just had to pull those masks off in front of the right people. I began to collect evidence, not to blackmail, not to threaten, but to build truth into something solid, undeniable. I recorded Mom when she called Ethan a burden. I saved messages where Amanda mocked me, texts from Dad reminding me that I should be grateful for their scraps. I photographed the torn shoes Ethan still wore to school, the bare shelves of the pantry they said were for my own good. Each piece felt like a brick, and I was quietly building something that would stand long after their words turned to dust. One night, I overheard Mom talking to Amanda in the kitchen. "Sarah's gotten too quiet," she said, her voice low. "She's planning something." Amanda laughed. "She doesn't have the guts." I smiled from the hallway. They were wrong. Silence didn't mean surrender, it meant preparation. Days turned into weeks, and I waited. I learned patience from my suffering. I learned timing from their arrogance. Every insult they threw at me became another match waiting to be struck. Then came the chance. Mom announced she was hosting another family dinner, this time with neighbors and friends invited. "A proper gathering," she said proudly, "to show everyone we're still the best family on the block." I agreed to come. I even offered to bring a dish. The day of the dinner, I dressed Ethan in his cleanest shirt, combed his hair, and told him to stay close to me. "Tonight's the last time we ever sit at their table," I whispered. He didn't understand, not fully, but he nodded. He trusted me. That was enough. The house was full when we arrived. The table gleamed under the chandelier, crowded with food, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, steaming bread. The neighbors filled the room with polite laughter, complimenting Mom's cooking, Amanda's outfit, Dad's stories. Everyone was smiling, pretending. I sat at the far end, as usual. No one offered me food. Ethan's bowl held nothing but plain rice again. Amanda leaned across the table, smiling wide. "Guess he's used to it by now," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Her twins giggled. Trash boys' dinner. The laughter rose around us. I waited. I let it swell until the air felt thick with it. Then I stood. Not tonight, I said softly. The laughter stopped. Forks froze midair. Mom turned toward me, eyebrows lifted. What did you say? I repeated it, louder this time. Not tonight. Not ever again. Dad's face darkened. Sit down, Sarah. Don't make a fool of yourself. I met his eyes. No, Dad. You've done that for all of us. The room went dead silent. Mom opened her mouth to speak, but I lifted the covered dish I'd brought with me and set it down in the middle of the table. The silver lid gleamed under the light. I brought something special, I said. Amanda rolled her eyes. What is it, pity casserole? I didn't answer. I lifted the lid. Inside were the pieces of our life they'd tried so hard to hide: Ethan's torn shoes, a receipt for the cheap groceries I'd bought with the few dollars they gave me, printed screenshots of their messages calling me a failure, a recording device blinking red. Then the recording played. Mom's voice filled the room, cold and sharp. Why would I feed trash when real family is sitting here? The neighbors gasped. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." Amanda stood, her face white. Turn that off. I didn't. Another recording followed, Dad's voice, sneering, she should be grateful we don't feed her outside with the dog. A heavy silence fell. Then Ethan's tiny voice came through the speaker, trembling, Grandma hit Mommy. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. The room shifted. Neighbors exchanged horrified looks. One woman whispered, "That's abuse." Amanda's fiancé, Jake, who had been sitting at the far end, stood abruptly. You let that happen? His voice cracked with anger. You called a child trash? Amanda tried to reach for him, stammering, Jake, it's not. He shook his head, eyes full of disgust. I can't be part of this. And then he left, slamming the door so hard the chandelier rattled. Mom's face crumpled. Dad tried to stand, but the weight of every eye in that room kept him in his chair. The proud Miller family, the model of small-town perfection, was suddenly nothing but ashes. I looked around, at the shocked faces, the silence that followed years of their laughter. Then I took Ethan's hand. You wanted everyone to see how perfect you are, I said quietly. Now they do. No one stopped me as I walked out. Outside, the night air was cool, clean. The smell of roasted chicken still clung to my hair, but it didn't make me hungry anymore. It reminded me of what I'd left behind: shame, cruelty, the hollow noise of pride. Ethan squeezed my hand. Are we leaving, Mama? I smiled down at him, the kind of smile that came from somewhere deep, steady. Yeah, baby, I said. We're finally going home. Behind us, the laughter had died. In its place, I imagined silence, the kind that doesn't fade, the kind that lingers and burns. They'd called me trash. But that night, I learned something true. Trash doesn't just disappear. It survives the fire. The night after the dinner, the town began to whisper. I heard it even before sunrise, the hum of voices outside, the low, disbelieving tones of people who had always looked up to the Millers. By morning, our family name, once polished and proud, was nothing more than a cracked mirror. Every neighbor had seen what we truly were. Every friend Mom had tried to impress now crossed the street instead of waving. Mom locked herself in her room that day. I could hear her pacing, the muffled sound of drawers opening and closing. Sometimes she'd cry, but never for me, never for Ethan. Her sobs were for her image, for the perfect mother she had pretended to be. Dad didn't go to work. He sat on the porch in his undershirt, staring out at the empty driveway, his beer sweating in the heat. The paper stayed unread beside him, the front page carrying a story about a respected local family facing allegations of domestic cruelty. He didn't even have the courage to deny it. Amanda didn't last long after that. Jake moved out the next day, and she followed him around town for a week, begging him to take her back. When he refused, she started posting pictures online, old ones, where everyone still looked happy, captioned with hollow words about forgiveness and family. But the comments were brutal. People remembered Ethan's trembling voice from that night. They remembered the recordings. They remembered what kind of mother she'd laughed beside. Her perfect life had vanished, pixel by pixel. I watched all of it quietly. I didn't gloat, didn't post, didn't reach out. I didn't need to. The truth was doing the work for me. For the first time, I felt peace. Not joy, not triumph, just peace, clean and quiet. Ethan and I stayed in a small motel for a few weeks while I looked for a new job. Every night, I'd tuck him into bed and tell him stories, not about monsters, but about strength. About how sometimes, silence isn't weakness. It's the space where courage grows. He'd listen with sleepy eyes, his small hand curled around mine, and I knew he was healing too. Mom called once. Just once. Her voice was hoarse, trembling. "Sarah," she said, "you destroyed us." I waited a moment, then answered, "No, Mom. You did that yourself." And I hung up. After that, I stopped answering unknown numbers. Weeks passed. The autumn air grew cooler, the leaves turning crisp and golden. I found a small apartment in another town, nothing fancy, but ours. Ethan had his own bed, his own little desk for drawing. I got a job at a diner nearby. The first paycheck I earned, I bought a roast beef, the same kind Mom used to cook. The smell filled the kitchen, thick and rich, but this time it didn't hurt. I watched Ethan eat, juice running down his chin, his eyes shining. "It's really good, Mama," he said, grinning. That was the moment I realized what freedom actually tasted like. Every so often, I'd see the Miller name pop up online. Someone would mention the scandal, the fall from grace. But it didn't make me angry anymore. The truth had already done what it needed to. My silence had become their noise. One evening, months later, as the sun bled orange through the blinds, Ethan came to me with a school project. He had to write about a person who inspired him. He showed me his paper, still smudged with pencil. "My hero is my mom. Because when people were mean to her, she didn't hit back. She waited. And when she finally spoke, everyone had to listen." I cried that night. Not because of the pain anymore, but because he had seen me, the real me. It's strange how quiet revenge feels when it's done. There's no music, no dramatic ending. Just a deep breath and the soft realization that you've survived. That's what I carried with me. Mom eventually sold the house. The neighbors said she left town, moved in with an aunt somewhere up north. Dad stayed behind for a while, then vanished too. Amanda tried to rebuild, but the town never forgot. The last I heard, she moved to a smaller city, working a modest job. Maybe, in some way, they learned something. Maybe not. I didn't care anymore. What mattered was Ethan and the life we were building. We planted a small garden behind our apartment. Tomatoes, basil, a few flowers he picked himself. Every morning before school, he'd run out to water them. He'd kneel in the dirt, hands messy, smiling like the sun had come up just for him. I'd watch from the kitchen window, coffee in hand, and think about how different laughter sounds when it's real. Sometimes, when the wind blew just right, I'd catch a faint scent that reminded me of that kitchen long ago, the roast, the perfume, the sharp tang of humiliation. But it didn't haunt me anymore. It reminded me of who I used to be, and how far I'd come. One night, Ethan asked, "Mama, do you think Grandma ever loved you?" I hesitated. Maybe, in her own way, I said. But love without kindness isn't really love. It's control. He nodded thoughtfully, the kind of understanding that comes too early to children who've seen too much. Then he whispered, I love you different. And he did. That was all that mattered. Years from now, maybe he'll forget the exact words they called us, the nights we went to bed hungry, the sound of that slap echoing through the kitchen. But I'll never forget. Not out of bitterness, but because remembering is my way of honoring what we overcame. Sometimes, late at night, I still whisper the words I never got to say that day. You wanted to feed the ones who mattered. Turns out, the one who mattered most was the one you threw away. There's a strange kind of justice in the way life balances itself. The proud fall, the silent rise. I don't know if what I did counts as forgiveness, but I know it was freedom. Now, when I walk Ethan to school, his hand in mine, people smile at us. They don't know our story, and they don't need to. They just see a mother and her son, laughing, alive, moving forward. The past doesn't vanish. It lingers, a faint ghost at the edge of memory. But it no longer owns me. It no longer defines who I am. They called me trash once. But trash can burn, and from the ashes, something new can grow. And that's exactly what we became, something new. Something strong. Something they'll never be able to break again.